Well, hello everyone. Here I
Hello.
am back. Marianela Medrano from Palabra Counseling and Training Center. And I am delighted to be back here with another conversation with colleagues. This time I have three, not two, but three. So the conversation promised to be a very good and a live one. And we will just follow the normal procedure that we do here. I'll ask questions and then they'll share their brilliant ideas with us, and they'll talk about their experiences. But I know that everyone wants to know who they are, so I'm gonna tell you. We have Johanna Navarro Perez. She is the director of Todo por mi Familia, a national initiative aiming to connect people impacted by the federal government's zero tolerance policy. Notice that I choked when I said that one. To mental health services. Prior to this role, Johanna was a supervisor at a mobile crisis response team for children and adolescents. The premise of that program was to reduce unnecessary police involvement with family and children experiencing acute mental health crisis. Johanna is a social worker by trade, receiving her bachelor's in both sociology and Latin American studies from Smith College and master's in social work from New York University, but considers herself an activist first. As a child of immigrants from distinct countries, she is always ready to debate whether the proper name is either Huizquil or Chayote. Okay, so we're gonna have a conversation about that. Because in Dominican Republic, we wouldn't say Chayote, so that's another thing. So my other guest is a native of Ghana, Mensimah Sabazz. Did I kill your last name, Mensimah?
No, it's perfect.
Okay. She is the president of Agape Consultant, which focuses on energy healing and transformational coaching. She holds a master's degree in transpersonal studies from Sophia University and a doctorate in philosophy and religion from the California Institute of Integral Studies. She is the author of Sankofa, Learning from Hindsight. And Mensimah offers a unique perspective on spiritual and intuitive living, drawn from her multicultural, multilingual, and indigenous background. She believes in creating a safe environment for individuals and groups to cultivate a spiritual and soul-based practice that is empowering and authentic. And we're gonna say much more about that. And then last but not least, right, is Michael Scrambler. He received his PhD in clinical psychology from University of California at Berkeley and conducted pre-doctoral fellowship at the Institute for Juvenile Research at the University of Illinois at Chicago. Upon completing his this fellowship, he became a postdoctoral fellow at Roche Neurobehavioral Center with funding from the William T. Grant Foundation. He completed a postdoctoral training at the Consultation Center at Yale within the Division of Prevention and Community Research at Yale School of Medicine with support from the Ford Foundation. He has been an associate research scientist and Yale assistant professor since 2014. He currently directs the Child Wellbeing and Educated Research at the Consultation Center at Yale, where he is also a senior evaluation consultant for Yale Eval and many, many more things. So as you can see, our three guests and colleagues come from different backgrounds, but have many intersecting lines here that I think are going to do for make a very rich conversation. And today we want to talk about racial trauma, which is a form of race-based stress taken to the maximum. And it specifically refers to people of color and indigenous peoples' reactions to dangerous events that are sometimes real or sometimes perceived experiences of racial discrimination. And these experiences might include threats of harm and injury, humiliation and shaming events, and witnessing racial discrimination towards other people. And we know all too well about that because 2020 is a year that has brought high dosages of that. So although racial trauma is similar to post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, it's unique in that it involves ongoing individual and collective injuries due to exposure and re-exposure to race-based stress. And that's the thing that motivated me to have this conversation, because this malady that is racial trauma is something that has legs in every layer of history from its beginning, and that it seems to be, it almost have that like a boomerang effect. It just comes back with vengeance, as we are seeing these days. So we are going to talk about, I want to not so much focus on the trauma per se, but on the healing. And that's why these three particular people were invited to talk about the healing approaches to that, and the interventions and the research that has been done that proves that there is a possibility for post-trauma growth. So in that sense, I want to hear from you, from the three of you, what are some of the culturally informed healing modalities and interventions, and also the research lens that that are most appropriate for these for addressing racial trauma. So I'm asking for how do we begin to envision, what are the evidence that will allow us to dream of a better world? What are you seeing? What have you studied? You can take it, it's a very wide question, so you can take it just about any place you want to take it.
Who wants to go first?
Mm-hmm.
Well, as you outlined in your introduction, we experience racism every day in many different ways. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that make it even difficult is that you can't get away from it, right? It's either institutionalized and or even from personal relationships, your colleagues at work, etc. Right? So, and individuals have been able to weaponize racism in ways that are almost flabbergasting. But they know that they can get away with it, so it continues. Now, as an individual experiencing this, one of the ways that you can get away from it is not to get caught up. And what I mean by caught up is sometimes it is so difficult to step away from all the stress of it, right? Because once you engage, it keeps going on. For example, if an employee were to experience racism and they filed a complaint, there's likely to be a backlash. And then there's a response to the backlash. And then there's another, so they heighten up, the punishment for even speaking out, which makes the experience even more painful. Now, one of the ways I would say is, one, the individual can seek help outside of their immediate community, or and talk to an expert, a coach, a counselor, the pastor, people who can really validate their experience. Because in validating the experience, the individual is also able to then begin to go to a place of healing and begin processing and incorporating things that would support their well-being, right? And once you step away from it and you're not engaged anymore, you can begin really focusing on other elements that can help you either get out of that situation or begin to heal and apply appropriate responses, right? The second thing I would talk about, and I will shift to somebody else going on, is to have a spiritual practice. Now, it's not religious at all, but going into a place of peace, trying to find that tranquility. And I think that since we are all spiritual beings, that once we connect to that part of who we are, we would then get inner guidance as to how to deal with some of these issues and actually be on the road to permanent healing. Right? So I'll pass it on, and then we can, continue the conversation.
Thank you. And before I hear, there is something that I want to highlight about what you said to maybe entice us to go deeper into that. But what I seem to have heard here is that there is shaming that we experience, right, in these daily interactions, and that leads to that internalized sense of deficit that brings us down, and that seeking out outside help when an institution is kind of circling or closing up on you. The seeking out help outside and the learning spiritual ways to center are key. So I just wanted to highlight those two things for us to kind of expand a little bit as we go. But let's hear from the other two colleagues we have here, Mike and Johanna.
Mike. Okay, well, I'll go.
I'm sorry, I was on.
There you are.
But you can go ahead.
Yeah, really interesting. It's like a super broad question. So I'm trying to think about like what your actual question was. And what stood out to me was, how are we being culturally informed? And so I'm thinking about, very specifically, I'm very much in the trenches of my program right now, where we're trying to find approximately 2,400 people who were separated from their children at the border in the last couple of years, like traumatically, violently separated from their children. And we're trying to find them, to connect them to local services. And they're across the country, we think. Our contact information that we have for them has come from the government, which the government has not kept the best records. And also, I don't blame my people for not being super responsive and keeping their addresses up to date with the government, right? And so it's been a little bit difficult to find them. But I think in terms of us being the first point of contact, that like we're calling them and we're saying, hey, you're a class member to this class action lawsuit, you were wronged. You were wronged. Something was done to you that was not right. Like it was not okay. It was legal. It was a policy. It was what this government was doing very intentionally, and it was not right. And you were wronged. And so I think that, especially for these folks, that many of them are indigenous, so have already been victims of genocide in their home countries, and are fleeing violence, to come here and to have that experience, and to sort of like, similar to what you said, Mensimah, about how we can't escape it, right? And then like on the news, you know, our president is calling folks like rapists and murderers and not the best. It's this like constant attack. So being able to just simply say to somebody like, you were wronged, how are you? How is your child? I'm genuinely concerned in how you are feeling and how you are doing. To me, that is like essentially culturally informed. Like it is like they overcame something so traumatic, likely have not had time to slow down and think about it. And there's someone who's spent all day trying to find them, trying to contact them, and is like, yeah, how are you? What, like, how's your kid? Have you guys talked about it? A lot of these families still haven't talked about it. And then furthermore, right, like, you know, the contract that we have is to connect them with mental health services, and that's fine, but we understand that there are often ecological barriers that keep folks from being in a space where they're ready to do that. And so again, I think being culturally informed is being able to say, oh, I'm sorry, you said you couldn't answer me because you have a toothache. Okay, like, let me figure out, where are you exactly? Where can I find you? Where's your local like dental clinic where I can connect you to? You're COVID positive right now and you're not able to work. Let me find your local food bank. And so I think acknowledging folks as like actual lived moment, and acknowledging and validating their experience to folks that exist in like dual or intersectional marginalized identities. I think for me, that's where my mind went with the question. So
yeah, and you know, Johanna, what you're saying, you're pointing out to another form of re-exposuring these people. Like, you know, most of them, as you said, and I see the same thing here in Connecticut, where most of them are of indigenous origin, and they already had been massacred throughout history. So now this is a re-injuring of their most vulnerable, you know, the sense of themselves is being just hit left and right. So what you're saying is so important for the healing, that just getting in touch and saying, how are you? I see you. I am here. I want to work with you. That's where the healing begins. You know, Jen Baker Miller said that healing happens in connection. That the main source of pain and suffering in the world is emotional disconnection. And boy, do we know that our systems are just produce that. In fact, that's one of the masks they wear, you know, that the disconnect. Right. So thank you so much for reminding us of, you know, those simple things that we can do to retrack or bring these people back on track. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, so I approached this from a little bit of a different perspective, because most of my research is school-based and focuses on children. And so I'm often thinking about the effects of stress, whether it's, racial stress or otherwise, on children. and what are the types of things we should be thinking about doing, kind of processes we should put in place, and policies and structures to support children's well-being and development and growth. And so when I think about issues like racial stress or other forms of stress facing kids, I'm often thinking about, well, what are the kinds of things that we need to do in terms of changing policies, changing structures, intervening in ways to give kids and adults, opportunities for success and to eliminate barriers. So I think there's kind of like that group of approaches and interventions. And then I also think about, this other kind of class of things that we need to be doing in supporting kids that have to do with building resilience. And I think that was one of the things, Marinella, you had mentioned that you wanted to talk about, is like, the resilience and resilience in the face of stress. And I think it's often the case that we underestimate, first of all, kids' resilience. The kids, I think, are far more resilient than we give them credit for. But I think there's something to say about helping to support youth and kids to develop certain skills and capacities to address the challenges that life is inevitably going to throw their way. And so while I believe that there are definitely some things we can and should be doing on a societal level in terms of policies and structures, I think it's also important for us to face the reality that we're never going to live in a perfect world, and that we all need strengths and abilities to deal with stressors as they come at us. And even if we could eliminate racism today with a magic wand, there are going to be other forms of discrimination, of prejudice, and bias that kids and adults are going to have to deal with. And I think it's important that we recognize that reality, and that we help to build in some of the capacity, skills, and strengths for kids to be able to respond to that. And you were asking, I think, a question earlier about is there any hope on the horizon? Right. And I would say that, I've gone back and forth since we've been in this what is some called the racial reckoning over the past several weeks. And I'll say that at first I was very frustrated and exhausted and very angered and somewhat despondent in response, especially to the George Floyd killing.
Right.
And but after having some time, having a little bit more distance from it, at least in terms of time, I'm seeing some signs of their I'm seeing some signs of change and engagement that I think are positive. I think people are thinking about these issues at a deeper level. That's spurring some action, and and thinking about how far we've come as a society. It's hard to. It can be hard to acknowledge that, when you're in a moment like this, that we have had some progress. And I would say that, I have, at least for, the Black community, over the past several decades, we've experienced, quite a bit of progress. And at the same time, we're not where we need to be, as a group, as society. And so, but I like to try to remember that we've come a long way as a society, that, certain racial minority groups, Black Americans, for example, have come a long way. And that's evidence that we can make progress. And I like to remind myself of that whenever I get too despondent about where we are as a society and whether we can overcome some of the major flaws and ills we have in society.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, I want us to stay with this idea of how do we build resilience. And I agree with you, Mike, that yes, the world is changing and there are things that have changed for the better. And that's what allows us to build the resilience. And at the same time, as we already said here, there are ongoing attacks on minorities, on the BIPOC community. We know that, you know, if we look at access to, you know, resources, food, education, what happens to their spiritual lives, what happens to language, and that these are, you know, rooted in history and you know, so many angles of history, colonization, neo-colonization, you know, the ripples of slavery or the modern versions of slavery continue to impact our progress, right? So the work that we have to do, I think I agree, Mike, 100% with you, is to focus on what is going well. Because if we, that's a form, Mensimah was talking about centering, that's a centering practice. That when things get difficult, we do have to find a way to center ourselves and to find something positive. That's the seed of resilience, is someone does something positive and then that creates change. So having said that, what is the connection between building, if there is any, between building resilience, not just for kids, but for adults as well, and inequality? Like, how much is the inequality that we're seeing, that we continue to see in the world, like especially in these times? I mean, COVID-19 has killed the most vulnerable because of the unequal access to resources. So how do we, I guess, how is there a way to keep a balance for us as researchers and as direct providers between, you know, the reality of, you know, that history keeps repeating and that people are re-injured, and that then, yes, there are enough resources out there to keep building resilience and to create a post-trauma, post-racial trauma growth?
Well, I think, for example, racism and these structural problems that we're having impact not just one person, right? It impacts the whole community.
Right.
But one of the things that happens at the same time is us losing our sense of worth, right? Our own power, mm-hmm. and the ability to change the dynamic. Mm-hmm. For example, I think back in the civil rights movement, you see, you know, people decided not to ride the bus, mm-hmm. for example. Mm-hmm. And the impact of that was they couldn't survive without people riding the bus, mm-hmm. because of, you know, how much they were losing financially, right? We have to, I think, go back to that place of recognizing our power within the dynamic, mm-hmm. in order to shift things a little bit. Mm-hmm. But it also gives us a renewed sense of self, right? And acknowledge, you know, that if you hold power, you can also make decisions that benefit your community. And you know, so it's not one person in it for themselves, but one person doing better for everyone else, right? And because a community that thrives also generates peace, harmony, love, etc. And when there's that peace, there's resilience. You can really protect, shield, and empower others. And it filters down to the children, right? As we were talking about the experiences we had with George Floyd, for example, there was desperation, you know, moving through so many minority communities because that sense of helplessness and hopelessness. Once we came together and you saw so many people standing for the right thing, it kind of invigorates everyone to look at their neighbor doing the right thing. So if you notice now, you see more people stepping out of their own way to video, you know, or record incidents of racism and expose it so other people will be aware of what is happening. And I think it's all empowering, really. As Mike said, we have to be hopeful about this because when we focus so much on what is going wrong, we won't see our way out of it, right? And Johanna also expressed this. Once we are able to make those connections, everyone benefits from that, right? Because one person then can help another person and it filters down. And I think that, you know, that's the hope in it. That's the power in it.
Yeah, and that is so in tandem, in accord with our communities, who are communities that come from a collective consciousness, right? So when we talk about togetherness, when we talk about resourcing and coming together, that's a language that they speak. They know about caring for one another.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, most indigenous communities function together.
Yeah.
The individual's needs is secondary to the community's needs, right? And there's contribution coming from everyone else. So, and that's how they thrive, right? So once we get back to those type of systems and really connecting and helping one another, we become a forceful community,
right?
Because we can then assert, you know, our power and also assert, you know, our desires, the things we would tolerate and the things we won't tolerate, right? So I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there.
Yes.
I think that there's a lot to be said about this notion of connectedness, about especially the kind of problems that, you know, we're talking about, of those being collective problems as well, even though, so, you know, Black and brown people are disproportionately affected by things like, say, police brutality. There is a framing that one could make about this being a societal problem. This is a problem, and sometimes I often wish it would be framed in this way as well. Like, this is not only a Black problem, because the police kill too many people in general, including white people, right? And so this is I view this as a collective problem that can only be solved on a societal level with enough societal engagement and interest and commitment to addressing it. And I often think about, you know, I come at problems like this often from a humanistic perspective, which I think is, you know, probably aligned with, you know, this, you know, spiritual, you know, perspective that's, you know, that we've been talking about today. But, you know, we're all in some of these problems together, especially when it comes to issues regarding safety, policing, This is something that is a community-wide, society-wide concern that we should all care about. And even if it did only affect one particular group of folks, that we should care that that group is being disproportionately affected. If we really view ourselves as being a part of this collective effort to build a more fair and equitable society, we should care about our fellow citizens and the fact that some of them are disproportionately disadvantaged. They're disadvantaged in ways that have no bearing on their level of effort, how industrious they are or not. It just has to do largely with their lot in life. And many of us who are successful are successful because of random circumstances of where we were born, who we were born to, the opportunities that were given to us through birth. And so I often wish that as a society, we could view many of these problems as ones that we were all invested in, and to the extent that we all should be caring about and are a part of a society that we're trying to build and make more fair. I often wish that we could view these problems in a collective sort of way like that views us all as part of the same effort to build something worthwhile.
Yeah. And before I mentioned Jen Baker Miller of the Stone Center in Massachusetts, because she, as I said before, she said that healing happens in connection, right? And we are functioning. We're talking about these ideas of collective thinking in an individualistic society where people know what they know the most, and especially the people in power, what they know the most are strategies for disconnection, meaning I don't want to see the pain in the ghettos. I don't want to see what's happening with the indigenous communities because that will get to my heart. So instead, I'm going to put on a mask and I'm going to become this entity that's disconnected to the collective. So absolutely, the work that we have to do here is about connection, is about re-emphasizing that we are all part of the human family, right? That's why I've been advocating for this post-racial world, and some people had said, well, but then that's a kind of melting pot. It's not. We are all part of the human family, and everything that happens in the world, in any corner of the world, is something that happens to us. So that's how we can enter this connectivity, this being happening in connection. When we wear the mask of these connections, then power over is possible. Because I don't see myself like you. I see myself as someone who can impose power over. And to going back to Johanna and the work that she's doing, that was talking about power over, right? What happened to those families at the borders, at the Mexican and United States borders, and the so radical, ways in which families were separated. It was almost as if whoever conceived this policy had no children or a heart. So how is that possible? Because of strategies of disconnections.
You'd be surprised they have children and hearts that grow. But, the issue is, how do we, we are all connected. That affects everybody, right? Like you said, it doesn't only affect Latino communities or Black communities or white communities. I mean, we're all connected, and what affects me affects you, and vice versa. And as spiritual beings, that's what we are here to do, to serve humanity, right? So, I think the beauty in what we are experiencing now is having people who normally won't step up and say, no, this is wrong. We have to fix this, right? So the more people do that, the more we'll be able to correct what is going wrong or what is being permeated in society, and make it better for everyone else, so that we all have peace, right? And share in the abundance or equity,
right?
That is available to all of us.
I'm stuck on this notion of the collectivist versus like individualistic society, and like I just feel like while maybe the four of us here value the collectivists, and while maybe some of our ancestors did, or maybe I think that it like presses up right against like the inherent capitalist structure of this country. And so then it's really challenging to remind folks that we are all connected and that we are all part of the same community. And so I don't know if Mike, I'm like in a space where you were at like a few weeks ago or something, where I'm just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I just don't know if it's, if I'm just in this weird, like, I don't know if right now, today, it's Friday afternoon, I don't know if I have like faith in that, like folks truly believe that we're all connected. I do, and yeah, so like, I'm kind of like, that's kind of stuck in my head right now. And I'm glad that you brought law enforcement into the conversation. I often bring it in way sooner than most folks because of my work on a mobile response team, where I've had to interface with law enforcement like professionally a lot. And I think the Johanna of how I was raised to kind of think about law enforcement or government entities as my parents or my mom's from Central America, my dad's from Mexico, and so like the like government law enforcement, I think tensions there were pretty tense. That Johanna, I think, understands law enforcement and my stance towards law enforcement different than a program supervisor that had partnerships with different sheriff's departments for the last 3 years. All that to say, I do think that this idea of like engagement and like true social engagement and like what, like actually coming to the table and talking about what it means to defund the police and actually talking about what it means, like bringing true curiosity to those spaces, really like leaning into like, tell me about, officer so-and-so, tell me about what that call was like for you and why, and like I think at the end of the day, mental health folk and law enforcement probably want the same thing, but there haven't been enough conversations to get us to that space where we can agree on how we want to get there. And then I think like what you said, Marina, that like the people that have power and control over those decisions, or that we perceive to have more power and control over those decisions, I don't know, they're either, maybe they don't believe themselves to be part of the collective, or they're not at the table. And so those are sort of things that came to mind. Just the last thing that I was thinking about is just how important I think it is to respect people of color's rage, like in any of these conversations. And I think that is why it's hard to engage, truly engage, because folks they have a hard time navigating that. And I think that it's okay to be angry and full of rage, and I think that it's we don't have a very high tolerance for that collectively.
Yeah, and I think, Johanna, going back to what you were saying, what allows individuals to see themselves, one of the many things that allows them to see themselves as separate from the collective is greed, is this sense of entitlement that then leads to greed. So if I feel entitled to the world, as many of these decision makers, people, and I don't want to think of who's sitting in the White House right now, because it's such an absurd situation that I don't even know where to put it. But that, you know, in order for them to see themselves as part of the collective, they will have to put away greed and entitlement and being able to cross a bridge, the bridge that leads to humanity and to touch. And that's the thing for us to grapple with. How do we build a community that is healing on itself, right? And because that's front and center of the work that we do. And we know that it's about that intervene, that being with one another, that happens through the flow of positive connections and not through control and power over. So how are we gonna do that? I'm going to pick your brains again. If you were to say one last I guess invitation, I don't want to say advice, but what invitation will you give to clinicians, educators, religious leaders, spiritual leaders? What is it that they need to know about creating resilience and fostering this post-trauma world? What is one thing that you're inviting them to remember?
Well, if we're looking at it, societal situations, right? Going back to what Mike said, I think we have to stop, you know, almost framing things in pockets. It's a Black thing, it's a Hispanic thing, it's this, you know, it's a white thing, it's poverty, it's this, classism, all those things. And begin from the basics. We as human beings know what is right or wrong. We know that it is wrong for somebody to buy a gun and go to a school and shoot kids.
Right.
So what do we do to eliminate that from our experience? We know that it is wrong to stop somebody, or for, you know, somebody to just call the police to say, oh, I saw a Black person walking down the street, just to get them in trouble. We know it's wrong, but we go ahead and do it. When we stop weaponizing these things within society, we can begin having conversations that are honest and heart to heart, right? It's not about me looking a certain type of way. It's just me being a human being within a society, a community. So that if I am white, but I'm doing the wrong thing, I will still get the punishment that a Black person will get, or a Hispanic person will get. If we are apportioning all these things fairly, this will begin to work well, right? And so I think that is a basic place where we can start a conversation. And all the people we talk about having power over understand this.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen.
So, so I'm going to bring it back to my earlier point about these kind of two classes of ways of responding to these things. And I'm going to focus just on one, because you asked about the role of clinicians and mental health providers. So I initially mentioned that there's this class of, I think, approaches we should be thinking about that have to do with intervening in society and intervening in settings, intervening in terms of policies. And I think that's largely what we're seeing now in terms of protests, in terms of pushing local and federal leaders to address some of these problems. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. But I want to focus now on and I'm entirely supportive of that. But given your question related to clinicians, those kind of working with individuals or smaller groups of individuals, what are the kinds of things that we should be thinking about? And you asked for one thing, so I'm sorry, I don't know that I can give one thing, but I'll try to lump a bunch of things into one thing. And that has to do this other class has to do with building resilience in folks, because there's just no way, again, that we're going, even if we can eliminate, certain societal problems, there's always going to be some kind of social stress that we're all going to have to deal with. I think having skills, coping skills to deal with that, regular routines to be able to deal with that, mindfulness for one is one. I've meditated with you, Mary, and Alana, on a regular basis during your sittings. I think mindfulness is one potential approach that can be very centering, but is also a part, I think, of a kind of class of approaches that in my area of work is referred to as social emotional learning. Yes. In schools. So that's an approach that kind of teaches kids certain social and emotional skills that help them become more emotionally literate, to be able to communicate, first of all, identify and communicate their own emotions to others, identify emotions in others, learn skills about social, how to resolve social conflicts, mm-hmm. how to respond to challenging, difficult, intense emotions when you have them. These are all kinds of skills that I think that are important for individuals to have in the world, whether they're facing racial stress or any other form of stress. I think they're important to develop in individuals as they're faced with some of the challenges that we're faced with, whether it's directly or vicariously through what they're hearing from other folks in their community. So and so as tempting as it can be to, I think, for mental health professionals thinking about jumping to changing society, which I will say that we absolutely need to do. The reality is that for individuals, for a lot of individuals, it's I need something that I can rely on now to deal with the stress I'm experiencing now. We can't wait for society to change before we can respond to the social emotional stressors that we're encountering. So these kind of fundamental coping skills, mechanisms are, I think, really important to help foster in youth and adults.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that there has to be a build-up at the intrapersonal level first, at the individual level, before we go out and impact the collective changes that need to happen. I absolutely, yes, it's a very good reminder.
I echo everything that my colleagues here said, and I agree with all of it. And I think to not be redundant, I'll pick something else. I think that for mental health providers, my ask, my advice, my desire, I think, would be for folks that are coming into the field to also do their own work and to also be mindful of what values they hold, and and what white supremacist structure they were impacted by, or what white savior stuff they have that's going on, and engage in some true curiosity and unpacking before they show up. Because as you said, the healing can happen in relationship, but harm can too, right? And this field is not innocent from that either. And so really, I think just I implore clinicians to show up ready to do the work, if not the ongoing work, but also having done some work, and also being ready to be challenged, and to look around and see who's not in the room, and to look around and see who should I bring with me? Where are my trans folks? Where are my queer folks? Where are my neurodivergent folks? And to just be mindful of that.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I agree with everything you said, and particularly with what you're saying, to be mindful that healing happens in relationships, but harm also happens there. And for us to question, where we come from and the privileges that we might be wearing that we don't realize. Even among us, people of color, there is, yes, thank you so much, Johanna, for bringing that up. And I always feel just when we're about to finish, that's when the real conversation is taking place. But we must stop here. I feel like now is when we're really putting the finger where it really needs to be in order for the healing to start. But maybe we'll have a part 2. But I want to thank you so much for taking the time on a Friday afternoon when we all just want to kick our shoes and relax. And you chose to come here and be tortured with my questions about how to save the world. But thank you.
Well,
My pleasure.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you all.
Nice
Yeah, it's nice meeting you all.
Bye.
And thank you for this.